Welcome everybody to the F4 Hunger Awareness Show.
It's my goal to feed 1 billion people before I die.
We want to bring awareness around the issue of hunger and food insecurity.
7 to 8 million people served so far. With the sole goal of eradicating world hunger by connecting sources of food to recipients in need. Fiorenza's Food for Friends.
Now, I want to kind of segue because we're all about creating awareness for hunger, food insecurity, trying to make people aware of issues that are facing our society today. Because at the end of the day, we're in this together. We have a short period of time, and our philosophy is how can we shed light on issues that are important and help as many people as we possibly can. So with that as our kind of framing, our backstop, you're involved in a lot of things. I wanted to pivot to what you're doing professionally. I'll share our screen here, but maybe you can talk a little bit about your role day to day now at Westchester.
Sure. So I serve as the executive director for external relations for Westchester University. It was a new position created in spring of 2018 out of the president's office, and essentially covers two main areas: serving as the government relations officer, as well as a liaison in community. And that can be chambers of commerce, neighbors near our student union, nonprofit organizations, and working also with our student government association for a couple of students in particular that sit on the Student Government Association. But then also one of the things that I think is really emblematic of our public mission at Westchester University is the Center for Community Solutions. And that is where we use university dollars to pay students to work on projects that meet community need. And it's absolutely amazing. Again, various levels in terms of, local, regional, state, federal. We've even had an international project, eStorm for Africa, and it's students recruit other students, community partners to other community partners. So it's one thing, again, to say mutually beneficial partnership, but it truly is, because it's an amazing opportunity for our students through experiential learning opportunities, and they're being employed, right? So you see some of the areas covered there, but also to give a sense of community partners, it can be, Hearing Loss Association of Chester County. It could be the Chester County Food Bank. We have a Veterans History Project that we've worked with a couple of times with U.S. Congresswoman Chrissy Houlihan's office. So elected officials, nonprofits, the public sector, and we have, for example, a student currently working on a project with locally the Westchester Green team, and to the point where he attended a recent research and creative activity day on campus, also featured in a local newspaper article. Good for him. And his work, he was actually leaving that event to go to a Borough of Westchester Sustainability Advisory Council meeting, because his data was going to help inform the revision of one of its sustainability ordinances. I mean, that's amazing, right? I mean, I think those connections and the extent to which students are able to pursue that career trajectory. I had one student in recent years that he had a graduate assistantship and asked me if he could work more hours. And, we certainly try to be equitable and fair. And I went to my supervisor and he's like, maybe 5 more hours, because again, I would want to make sure I could do that for other students. And he goes, yeah, I really think I'm going to leave my graduate assistantship. I mean, this is spot on. This is what I want to do for my career.
Wow.
And I mean, having done that and worked to help pay for, I had I called him, I had a conversation. I'm like, look, I can't give you more than 5 hours. And you really, I don't know that you want to leave your graduate assistantship, but let's see what we can do. Right. And so, but all to say, to give you at least a few examples of recent times and currently the impact of some of those projects. And I will say, with the Chester County Food Bank being, that is one of the projects as well currently.
So not every university has this. This is something that you're running at Westchester. Any student can apply, undergrad,
Yes.
graduate?
Yes.
And it's
And
how
what we do by way of recruitment is twofold. One, every enrolled registered student has what we call a handshake account. It's a third party, it's run through our Career Development Center, and we post the opportunities on Handshake. So, again, that's open to
oh
all students. And then we take the second part of that is taking a more targeted approach. So for example, I referenced the Veterans History Project with Congresswoman Houlihan. Well, then, I reach out to the chair of our history department. Hey, Dr. Kodosky, we have this project. It's on Handshake. This is how the student can apply. You might have a particular student or students that would be really strong candidates for this. And so it's the working internally with our friends, right, in different offices and colleagues and different faculty members. And then again, like I said, it also spreads rather well and easily through the community. And State Senator Carolyn Comita recently had a symposium, a nonprofit symposium for the arts, culture, and history to really
oh
help support those organizations, and had asked to have the Center for Community Solutions featured as one of the again featured entities that by way of resources. And in all fairness, she was one of the ones that helped spearhead the Center for Community Solutions.
so when did this start? This
2016.
okay.
And it was, I believe, when Senator Comita was then mayor and President Weisenstein at the time, and maybe some of our other university leadership. And the idea that Comita had brought to this was, if you have this university college in your backyard, so to speak, we ought to be asking, how can you leverage those resources, be working together. And so this is again, a very clear representation of walking the walk. I
Yep.
think it speaks well to our leadership, and I'm grateful for that. And I know our students and community partners are too. And then at the end of the month, we're actually going to have our what I call gratitude reception. So I started that, and we're going to do that now annually. And it's a great way of bringing everyone together and thanking them, and also the exchanges that they can have, right? Especially, let's say, if we have more locally speaking good number of projects in Coatesville, well, then that one knows the other one, and then they can help with the other, right? So, or students working on one project in, one current example in South Coatesville, and then she wanted to take on a second. So we try to be careful with that. They're students first, but as long as, they tend to work 5 to 10 hours a week. And but my point in that is, again, building awareness within a community when a student does that, right? Takes on a couple of projects in the same community, and that network becomes even stronger. And that may work for a certain student that wants to learn more, and again, be more intentional in how to engage on a particular topic and or community.
Yeah, I guess Isabella, how and this is the program you participated in, correct?
I think
This
mine
is
might be a little bit different. Mine's the
Slightly
Ramsey
different.
program, yeah.
Okay. So, but it's similar in the sense that you were working with a nonprofit in the community.
Mhm.
So, how does this type of program, being in school, how does it help you kind of round out your overall educational experience?
I think it teaches you so much more than what you can learn in a classroom. Because of course, like the classroom work is very important because you're learning, basic knowledge and important things. But being in the community and being able to do things that you would do in your future job are really important and teach you so much. I feel like I've learned a lot with working with F4. Um, and I wouldn't have gotten that in the classroom because we don't specifically learn as much about nonprofits in my schoolwork. So I think it's really helpful for students. And I didn't know about this other program either when I started school.
What would you tell your friends and other colleagues that are still in school right now about these types of programs? Would you
I would
recommend
tell them
them?
to look into it. Look into what your school has, or what else Westchester has. Because I've noticed these past couple of months is that like Westchester has so many resources for students, and different things they can get involved in. And especially also when you're helping your community at the same time, it's even better. You're helping other people while learning a lot yourself.
So well said. Dr. Dietrich, before we go to government affairs, Take out your philosophy hat. What does this mean? Neighbor is not a geographic term, it's a moral concept.
Right. Actually, I was interviewing one of the presidents in my doc when I was working on my dissertation, and she said, "What you're talking about." So she was well, to keep the yes, the confidentiality of those whom I interviewed, but let's just say this leader of a higher ed entity shared this quote with me. And Joaquin Prince spoke, I believe, right before Dr. Martin Luther King in his I Have a Dream speech. So if you look at that, you will find this in part of that. So I extracted it to say that, neighbor isn't, so let's keep it where we are in Borough of Westchester. Neighbor doesn't mean, well, you live next door to me. It's not geographic. It's neighbor. I'll say, I'll go back to like we're human beings. It's you. It's right. And so how we treat one another, and that's why thus, it is a moral concept. It's who we are, how we treat one another, and that more human level of what it means to be a neighbor, not just more transactional and happenstance of living next to someone.
So well said. I love the theme of this, Isabella. This is really a great theme of this show today. Okay, so what is the government affairs? So that's also part of what you're working on.
Yes.
Can you expand
And
on that? What
sure.
they're doing?
Sure. And if you scroll down, I think you'll
Sure.
probably find there's like an advocacy resource center. That's relatively new. But again, it's a way of really helping encourage students and faculty to, well, there we go, right there, learning the difference between advocacy and lobbying and what that engagement looks like. So, being one of the institutions of the Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education, certainly every year we work to advocate on behalf of Westchester University as well as our sister institutions, right, on making sure that we're getting funding, for example, for this year that we can keep tuition frozen for an eighth year in a row. But really expanding it and being able to say, having, for example, we created a policy for that public engagement policy and what does that look like, but wanting to really encourage and support if faculty members, staff members have relationships, how best to leverage them and the institutional awareness around that and responsibility around that. But also, hey, we have an office, the Office of External Relations, that can really help you. So, for an example, if someone wants to bring a state or federal elected official into a classroom, that's fabulous, right? Like marvelous. But there's a way to do that. There's probably a logistics form. Who's going, where's the person going to park? Who's going to, do we have a gun-free policy? I mean, there are a good bit of details that if you haven't done it before, it's like, I just wanted the person to come to my class. What's all this? Also, I'm thinking, our College of Education and Social Work has a very strong interest in advocacy and two things I will say on that. They actually created an ad hoc committee, and I'll be working with them, I believe next week or the following, in helping them, what information do they need when they go to advocate? What does that look like? What can, if they're advocating on behalf of the university versus a private citizen? And the same thing goes for students, right? So, one example that I would give by way of advocacy and impact, quite honestly, was relatively recently, our dean of our College of Education and Social Work and one of our student teacher candidates provided written and verbal testimony for the State House Education Committee, which we hosted on campus. And one of the things that was part of their advocacy was for a new student teacher stipend program. Well, that work we understood to, the feedback that we got was that was integral to helping to get that legislation passed. And that is now active legislation that helps because, to be clear, when students are doing their student teaching all day, all week, they're not getting paid for that and they're taking classes. So for them to earn income
Yep.
is a bit challenging. Same thing, similarly for clinicals for other students, nursing students or what have you, right? So that legislation was really helpful. And again, current and from last year to this year, the request in the budget is to double that funding because they didn't re realize the demand was that high across the Commonwealth
Hmm.
for right? Because we know there, we have heard in again recent time the teacher shortage, the challenge with diversity in the classroom, and how do we address that, right? So that was really, really valuable legislation. And the other thing institutionally that it did was we have a fund for unpaid internships because we do try to make sure that opportunity is equitable and that students are able to um, you know, fulfill the requirements, whether it's in their program or the service experiences that we were talking about, right? So the student teacher candidates were part of the application pool for the fund for unpaid internships. So when you pulled them out, then it enhanced opportunity for the other students to get funded through the fund for unpaid internships. The other piece is just yesterday through my office, I co-sponsored with the Student Government Association and specifically a stellar student, the legislative affairs senator, and we had a roundtable discussion, and it was called Student and Community Leaders Roundtable. And we had State Representative Kyle Mullins do a keynote, former philosophy student of mine, actually.
Hmm.
Um, Two other state representatives, the head of the Chester County Department of Human Services, the Deputy Chief of Staff and District Director for Congressman Houlihan, someone formerly from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, and I could go on, right? But you get the point. And then students rotated every 15 minutes in having these conversations. And I think it's things like that. And I have ideas and plans but in terms of how to enhance that engagement. But the more that we can do that, or getting into talking to a nutrition professor, and a couple of weeks ago, she was going to be actually at an ethics conference and filling in for her class. And they had a legislative assignment. They were going to have to identify a particular nutrition policy, related legislation and write their legislator. And so to talk to them about that, but then more broadly about that engagement and who they are, and again, serving and leading in community and how to go about that. So again, I think you can understand from our conversation, even here today, my love for students and passion for that, and teaching being very natural. And so when I can more formally teach in terms of the classroom, I do and always welcome that. And at the same time, I've been really energized because students are the most inspiring whenever I can have opportunities like the event yesterday, like getting in front of a class, a community nutrition class, and really, I think too, the partnership that we can have with faculty, right? In supporting faculty in their work and engagement, and oftentimes with professional associations, and at the same time, right, helping them help the students because they may know a particular their content area, but they're not expecting, right? We're not expecting them to know how to help students advocate or right, and that's where we can work so well together.
Yeah, so well said. I love that. Working so well together. Well, this has been really, really great. The last thing that I wanted to kind of focus on was your work outside of Westchester in the community. So maybe we can touch upon your work with the food bank. I'm going to pull that up now. We've been working with the food bank. I actually started working with the food bank when they were on Horseshoe Pike in Downingtown, and they were started Larry Welsh and Bob McNeil.
Mm-hmm.
And I started doing the food ministry in 2007. So they started, I think, in 2008 or 2009. So we had partnered the YMCA in Coatesville with the food bank for food drives. So I did that for a number of years when I was on the WISE board. But the food bank's always had a special place in my heart, and obviously they do so much for the county. I'd love to kind of hear how you got involved. You're on the board now, what you're doing, what the food bank's doing. I'd love to hear any information and insight around food and security.
No, I appreciate that. And it was, I believe initially it was really through Westchester University and working with, I served on this advocacy committee. Another colleague joined me in that. And so we continue to meet regularly. And I had learned that there was a need. They were working to identify additional board members at the time. And I was working, talking with Andy Out, who heads
Yep.
the Chester County Food Bank. And so I basically would ask her, I was like, this might be a bit bold, but like I think you mentioned that you were looking for board members. Like, what if I'm interested? And so, you know, I said personally as well as professionally, in other words, yes, the university, but like otherwise, it's something that I feel very strongly about that I would love to be involved and see what I can do to help. And so that's really how that started, to be honest. And then, great individuals. So really love that work. Certainly in current times, there are a lot of challenges, and I wouldn't be able to, I think our team and Nick and Bessie it does a phenomenal job in his role working with elected officials and speaking of advocacy, right, around all of that. So, we could go there, but I'll keep it a bit
Yep.
more broad in terms of our time together and what your question was. I think, but certainly the different committees and personally serving on the advocacy committee has been really valuable and the different strengths that people have. I think it's a strong representation across the community. And with the programming that they have, I mean, we can't begin to, or the backpack program in the summer, where I want to say it's going to be upward to 3,500 up to 5,000. Um, by way of the summer program. So to be clear, when right students aren't in school and they have that need and would otherwise have food insecurity, not be fed like they would during the school year, to have a backpack program that demand is that high, right? But that could also be, hey, can somebody help and donate the backpacks? Because what does that look like when we're, and the sensitivities around that, or and the need has been increased as we've seen in our resource pantry on campus. It has really increased, and so we're fortunate that Chester County is such indeed an affluent county, but there is still a great need. And so I think finding the commonalities of how can we best address, get to the root of, right? And that's one of the things I really appreciate in particular about the food bank is looking at how trying to get to the root of it and empower and support people, right? Like the program that we have that, provides certification, helps people, go through that program and be able to then get employed, right? And I think that helps in addition to the donations and helping people in emergency situations, the more long-term approach. The other thing that the food bank has recently done through ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan Act funding through Chester County, is to create the Food Alliance. So the food bank serves as the facilitator for the Food Alliance, which really is, hey, let's bring everybody together, Phoenixville, Oxford, Coatesville, Westchester, in the various food cupboards, so that we're not, quote unquote, tripping over one another, right? And so I think that's relatively new, but again, bringing in resources from transportation, um, the partnership to end homelessness, and chambers of commerce, and having the leaders in the room to discuss some of these more broad community areas of need.
Yeah, I think that's something really neat, Dr. Dietrich, that the food bank has done is they've really tried to integrate with different organizations in society, trying to really focus on a community-based approach as opposed to just the distribution of food, collecting food, distributing food, which is important. It's really a lot of what we do. We get access to food, we procure it. A lot of it's food recovery that we do, and then we find partners that can utilize it day in and day out. They've kind of taken the concept of, and they still distribute. You can see how many community partners they have,
Absolutely.
but they've done a lot to create advocacy and really try to work and integrate with other organizations in the community, which falls right in line with your value system of uniting and not dividing. So I think it's really neat.
I appreciate that. And the university, it may be worth noting, is now a tier one partner of the Chester County Food Bank. So we're, strongly dependent and a strong partner, the institution, Westchester University is.
Yeah, it's amazing. Westchester really is doing a lot of good work for Chester County. I mean, really being a great leader on so many fronts. These